Natalie, and thank you to all of you who are joining our session. I wish I could see all of your faces, but I appreciate you spending this hour with us. There's an incredible lineup of breakout speakers during this time, so I'm honored that you would come and spend this time here with us. For the story that happened to me yesterday, and I think it can be one that you may relate to in your work in fundraising. I get a call on my phone, and I notice by the caller ID that it's a contact from one of the foundations we've been working with, and been considering a $200,000 proposal from us to fund our work. And I don't care what size your organization is, $200,000 is a lot of money. And if you'd asked me, I would have said, hey, this is the done deal. We did this exactly by the book. We have built the relationship, we've found alignment, we've submitted a great proposal, thing is going to go through. And I answered the phone yesterday, and the person there says, Justin, I'm so sorry, but we've decided to pass on your proposal. Okay, so why do I share that with you? You may be wondering, why am I leading this session, for one? But two, I want to say that fundraising and the call to engage donors is an incredibly difficult task. And no matter how long I do it, which has been about 13 or 14 years, there's still this part of me that really hates hearing no, because I know what good can be done with resources and with funds. The other reason I share that story with you is because in that moment, I had a choice of how to react to that. The one reaction is to let fear take over me, that I would revert to my kind of base instinct of a scarcity mentality and realize and think there's not enough to go around. There are not enough resources to do this work. And going down that path leads us, maybe not in a single day, but it leads us to make decisions about fundraising. Ultimately, could end up causing you to undermine your programs, causing you to exploit the clients you're trying to serve, and potentially even hurting the relationships that you have with your donors. And really, the mindset that I want to call you to today is this abundance mentality. And if you are a person of faith, like I am, you don't have to look very far in Scripture to see that we serve a really abundant God. But even if you're not a person of faith, there are so many benefits to operating out of this abundance mentality and not a scarcity one. In this abundance mentality, you're willing to take risk. You're willing to innovate and try things. You're not so held captive by the resources that you have. But in a scarcity mindset, you're fearful and you want to protect and maintain what you have. And I just don't think it's a really good leadership posture for us to take. And so today, I'm assuming most of you may have complicated emotions about fundraising. Like a lot of leaders I talk to, they say that they see fundraising as a necessary evil. And I understand that, but I'm one of those really weird, over the years have come to have a deep love for this work of development. And I may not be able to convert all of you today to that point, but for me, I think that journey started with understanding this abundance mentality and not to get trapped in this cycle of fear and scarcity. And so maybe today, more than anything else, to more practical tools of fundraising, maybe there's some of you that just need to work to think about reframing the work of fundraising and changing that scarcity mentality into an abundance one. So what I want to do first today, I'm going to share my screen with you here. I've heard it said or that content without context is meaningless. And unfortunately, there's more than 30 of you on the other side of this. Content without context is meaningless. And I don't know the things that you're challenged with in your organization, and I hope we have some time to talk about that in Q&A. But I just want you to take the next 60 seconds, and I want you to write down what is the greatest fundraising challenge that we're currently facing as an organization. Because when you walk out of this meeting today, my hope is that there will be at least one thing that you'll take with you that you can implement to move you that much closer to realizing fundraising goals. So take 30 to 60 seconds and write down what is the one challenge that you hope today that you can take a step towards overcoming through our time together. Okay, I hope you've written down something, and let's actually is the lens to which you look through this content and say, what can we do in context that would help apply some of these ideas that we're going to share today. First of all, let me give you just a minute of context about me and the organization that I lead, because the content I'm going to share today is very much informed by the type of fundraising that I've been doing for the last 12 years. I lead an organization that's called Care for AIDS, and our mission as an organization is to empower people to live a life beyond AIDS. And we do that through 71 church-based centers in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. And as I said, we started this about 13 years ago, and I spent a large part of that time raising funds. A little bit of a picture of our fundraising situation. Last year we raised just over $5 million, but that $5 million, more than 90% of that was raised from about 150 major and mega donors. So as I talk today, I want you to keep in mind that many of these principles are universal, but they're also coming through the filter of and there's a really good chance that your strategy for fundraising is not going to be our strategy, and that's okay. Hopefully I can give you some tips and tools to help you create your own strategy that fits better your mission, your organization, and your strengths. So I'm going to kind of break this into 3 sections today before we get into Q&A. I'm going to talk a little bit more high level about why I believe we do the work of fundraising. I believe it's really important to share on the topic. Then I'm going to get into kind of the who question of who should we be targeting as our core donor group, and then talk about a little bit more tactically about how we might go about to achieve our goals. So I want to start with this question of why do we fundraise? And maybe this isn't really a novel idea to you, but if you're a lot of organizations that I talk to, we are very good at understanding our customer as the people that we're trying to impact their lives. Our clients are beneficiaries. But we don't often sit and think really deeply about our donor as a customer and understand that, like a customer in other enterprises and other venues, that this donor is looking for a value exchange from our organization. And it's not the traditional value exchange that you would see in a typical business where they're not getting a product or a service from us. But there are intangible and some tangible value that they want to receive on the other side of that relationship. And when there's balance, what often happens as an organization is we believe, and a lot of times us as leaders really internalize this, that we don't have anything to offer the donor, that it's a very one-sided relationship, that we are somehow trying to extract value from that donor without giving them an equal return. And this is the lie that I think we have to break down and avoid as nonprofit leaders. Because what ultimately happens is it results in this dynamic where, and some of you probably heard this, is some people equate fundraising with begging. And they say, oh, this, you have to go beg for funds. And I think that term begging implies this very unequal power distribution where that the donor has all the power and that we as an organization have nothing to offer. I believe in reality, when we do it right, we understand that what we have to offer to the donor is so incredibly powerful and valuable to them. We could spend a whole day on this and try and unpack at least my worldview on this topic. But in general, I would say there are a lot of things that we take for granted when we think about how we're engaging with donors. First of all, most donors, or a lot of donors, they know that they have a certain purpose they're trying to live out in the world. And one of the only ways that they can do that is through partnership, through giving to organizations. So we're helping them fulfill their purpose through this kind of partnership. Some of you believe, and I do, that it's not just an saying of it, it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. And I say that like it's a commonly understood phrase, but we don't often live like that, because if we really believed that there was more blessing that would be given to that donor by them participating financially in our work, then we would not have as much reservation about inviting them to participate with us. But this is key as we think about why we fundraise, to remember that we are there, yes, to resource the life-changing work that we're doing, but also to find ways to add value to our donor, and that it is truly a value exchange and not a value extraction. I want to share a quote here that I love, regardless of matters of faith. I would encourage you to pick up a little book called A Spirituality of Fundraising. It is a phenomenal read. But Henry Nouwen in this book says, I ask for money standing up, not bowing down, because I believe in what I am about. I believe I have something important to offer. And today I believe that about each one of this call. The organization has something incredible to offer, but you may not believe that. And I think it is impacting how you are going about your fundraising. Today, we don't have time to do them as a group, but I think there are some practices that you could do after our call today to help you just think differently about these topics. So the first one is, I'm going to invite you to take some time later to reflect on this question of, what is my worldview on fundraising? I can promise you have a spirit of reluctance around fundraising, that you do it begrudgingly, that your team and your board volunteers will inherit that same point of view, and it will make it very hard for you. So my hope for you is that this could become something that you find great joy in doing, because I believe it's an amazing work. Okay, so now I want to move to the section of talking about who should we be talking to, who should we be targeting as our donors. When I went back to business school a few years ago, and in my first day of my marketing class, my professor said something that stuck with me. And I have to confess, though, I started the class the same day or the same week that my daughter was born. So I don't know what he said. So I hope I don't misquote him here. But he said that what we're going to do in my class for the next semester, I'm going to teach you to answer 3 questions to help understand marketing. Who is your customer? What do they value? And how do you provide that value better than your competition? And I know for some of you, the word competition even is like, oh, can we say that? We'll talk about that later. But who is your customer? What do they value? How do you provide that better than your competitor? And these are some questions that we all need to really sit with as nonprofits. And we all need a crash course in marketing, because frankly, we spend a lot of time as organizations focused on meeting the really felt needs of those that we're trying to serve, but end up all of our donors the same. We kind of group together, we communicate the same, and in a way of micro targeting, if you will, where we are the information and the ads that we need at any given time based on what all of this data says that we want, to treat all of our donors the same is really missing an incredible opportunity. So I think these are the questions that I want to guide us for the next few minutes before we jump into the Q&A. So the first one is, who is your customer? Who is your donor? And I'm going to make a statement here, and this may be one of the more controversial things I'll say today as we talk about fundraising, but I believe that it's been my experience that this idea that the goal is to diversify our donors from as many different types of donors as possible to create a more balanced portfolio of donors is a myth. I believe that that is a really hard strategy that I have not seen play out in very many contexts. There's a great article. This is a pretty wordy slide, but I wanted to share this with you because there's an article that I won't go into the details, but it talks about that during this period of about 35 years, they looked at all of the organizations that grew to be over $50 million. And none of us probably are knocking on the door of $50 million. But as they studied them, there's one that was only 144 in the US, 35-year, and 90% of them had a single dominant source of funding that allowed them to build that size. As I read this article, this quote is directly from that. The way funding flows to organizations this large is neither completely random nor illogical. On the contrary, we identified three important practices common among nonprofits that succeeded in building large-scale funding models. One is that they developed funding in one concentrated source rather than across diverse sources. Two, they found a funding source that was a natural match to their mission and beneficiaries. And three, they built a professional organization and structure around that funding model. And while, like I said, this may not resonate with you from a science perspective, these three principles have been true for us in our organization, and I would challenge you that they might be true for you. That your success may lie in identifying a primary source of funding, that source of funding would be one that's deeply aligned with your organization, and that you would build your structures and your team that as opposed to chasing all these different ones. This really kind of hit home for me. In fact, I was sitting with two other peer organizations that were at a similar stage as Care for AIDS. How we'd had success was about 80% of our funding, and another person at the table started talking about how they had about 80% foundation support, that they were really dependent on producing strong impact measures because that was what was required for them to reach these foundations. And the other one at the table started talking about how 80% of their funding was from grassroots donors, and they had a really amazing artist strategy with recruiting smaller donors at concerts and stuff. And so organizations, by most standards, would have been considered successful, growing, but all of our donor sources are concentrated in one specific type. And I realized then that was one of the reasons why Care for AIDS, I think, has been successful in fundraising, is because we haven't divided our focus on so many different sources of fundraising that it has diluted our efforts. We all know how valuable our limited resources are. And so to think about serving our clients and beneficiaries well, and then dividing that remaining resources among trying to serve multiple demographics, it really just doesn't set us up for success. The next question that I want you guys to ask is, what do they value? And this is a busy slide on purpose. The reality of it is that when we think about what our donors value, I don't think we think about it in the right context. We do think about it like, okay, well, what kind of communication do they value from us? What part of our program or they really value that we can communicate to them about? But I believe that donors have deeper needs and wants that go beyond just being communicated to about the work, but that they actually would like to receive some other types of value from a partnership with a nonprofit. Here, I mean, just let me pull an example. We've really identified that a lot of our donors are in an age and a stage of life where they really want to teach their kids about generosity and service. And so we've designed strategies around how can we help our donors do that, because that is a rich value add to them, more than just, here's some information about the work. We create these experiences for our donors to go and interact with our work in East. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but that's something that's a value add for our donors, and it has been a core part of our strategy. So I would encourage you, if you've never really sat down and thought about what do our donors value on this kind of level from your organization that would enrich their lives, their businesses, their families. Think on, and I think you will identify some elements of a strategy that could help you be more effective in serving. Kind of a quick wrap up to that or follow up to that is that really where Chick-fil-A has succeeded is we have found our strategy really nicely in the middle of our fundraising competencies and this donor value alignment. So we have identified a donor group that is well suited to support the work of Care for AIDS, and major donors has been really good for us. But we also are, as an organization, have strengths that enable us to relate well to people with to high net worth donors. So whether it's the trips to East Africa, I know that as a founder, my bias was towards high touch relational investment in our donors, and that has been a competence we've developed. So high stewardship, high touch, and we also know that our work is pretty foreign to most people, and so being able to engage with donors face to face and cultivate a relationship over time works better for us than trying to communicate it maybe in just a digital. So a lot of these things kind of fit together to say, okay, where is this right intersection between where our strengths as an organization and where our value proposition and donors' values intersect in the right place, that we can identify where can we have the greatest success in our fundraising. Let me kind of land it here in the next couple of minutes so we can have some questions. But the last question to think about was, before I move on, I put some reflection questions here that I think would be good for you guys to take down for after this event. What are some different value segments for your donors? So maybe doing a segmentation value, not just on capacity or location. And then where are you best positioned to provide that value to your donors? And then the last question is hard for me to answer in this format because I don't know what your donor values. But I will say that even as this question might sit a little bit weird with you because maybe you don't see other nonprofits as competitors, but as collaborators in this work, we have to remember one of the biggest competitors that our donors are faced with is just the choice to purchase anything else like to other than giving to our organizations. So there is a tension there where our donors are being pulled not just to give to other organizations, but to consume any other type of product or service that's not them participating in LP. I list these four here because these are kind of the four environments that we interact with our donors in. And they're somewhat universal. The first one is trips, and kind of written of our priority on them. Impact trips for us is actually taking our donors to experience our work on the ground. And as I said earlier, I say this very carefully and cautiously because I think there is a very good way to do it, and then there is a way that could be very harmful to your work and to your clients. And so the context you're in, that may or may not be appropriate, but that has been a big part of our work. And then there's the one-on-one relationships, which is really what strategy as a major donor organization. And then small groups and large groups, those are the kind of environments that actually help get people into the room exposed to Care for AIDS. And then we get to move them into a one-on-one environment where we can and begin to cultivate that relationship. I will share a version of a engagement cycle here. And this is probably a little bit more suited towards major donors. It may look a little bit different, but this is something that describes how we think about donors. First of all, we connect with them, hopefully probably in one of those formats I described above. Then we begin to cultivate that relationship with them. Really understanding their story, their passions, their purpose, what it is that they want to connect to. At that point in time, ask us first how they can support, how they can give. We then initiate that ask of would you be willing to consider partnering to advance this work? And then after that, we go into this stewardship process. And for us as a major donor focused organization, that stewardship piece is so important. The thanking, I know all of you know this, but I think if all of us just committed to be really diligent in writing thank yous to our donors, that alone would speak volumes. It is really forgotten in this day and age to do that well. Reporting, making sure that donors understand what is it, what they gave to, and how that impacted the people that we're trying to serve. And then for us, we think this key element is really important. We are walking alongside our major donor in life, and we want to know about what's going on in life, how we can celebrate with them, how we can mourn with them, and we spend a lot of time trying to care for them well. And if we do that well, then they're the ones that host small group events for us, or they invite their friends to go to Africa, or they refer us to people for a one-on-one meeting. So that's how we connect with more people, is if we do the stewardship process really, really well. Let me just encourage you as we talk about stewardship here, let me just share this with you. I think it's powerful. People always talk about losing donors to donor fatigue, but in reality, I believe it's donor abuse. I don't know who said this first, but today, donors, more than anything, I think they wear out and they lose engagement with the organization. It's not because they just got tired of the mission, but they really felt like there was probably this unequal value. They were being asked to give and give and give more than they were receiving on the other side. So today, I just want to say that while many of us, if we're not careful, can think of fundraising as a means to a greater end, I would encourage you to think differently about it as an end in and of itself. The impact that you could have on a donor's life may seem pretty marginal compared to the impact of seeing a client or whatever it is. But I've had people that have just broken down and cried and said, "Thank you for letting me be a part of what CarePhrase is doing. You have no idea how much it's changed my life." And so we had the incredible challenge, but also the incredible honor of not only trying to serve and help transform the lives that are our program beneficiaries, but we have the chance to impact the lives of those who are our partners in giving. And so I would end with just this idea that fundraising is an incredibly noble calling. That's something that I hope you guys can find joy in, and that if we, it has the potential to transform both the donor and the beneficiary. So thank you for letting me walk through that.